Okay, so this is really not a video I thought I was going to be doing because it's a very, very, very hot topic. Very, very demanded by a lot of people. And of course, I have a bit of a bias, a bit of a, you could call it inside information. But I think it's interesting. Today I was watching a post on Reddit. People were asking, like, what's going to happen to the drone industry once DJI is going to be banned in the US. I mean, to everyone's their opinion. I don't wish them anything, but I just couldn't keep up with the whole DJI in the US, and I kind of thought they were already banned and it was done and for them, and they moved on with the rest of the world. But the big topic was like, what's going to be the alternative? Is someone going to go show up and everything? And I'm here to tell you about why basically no one has made a DJI alternative. Why is it so hard? And I think the interesting bit is that I'm going to give you a little bit of what needs to happen for an alternative to DJI to show up, a semblance of real competition to DJI to happen. Now, the first thing is that there's a ton of companies out there who have claimed and continue to claim that they compete with DJI, that they offer something that is on par with them. Usually my favorite is when they come around and they really claim that they have feature parity or that they have an actual drop-in replacement. That's always hilarious. Not just for me, because I'm not just coming around and tickling and trolling people, but because the end users are systematically in every possible forum destroying these companies and telling them that no one is buying the bullshit. So first, let's give you the sauce right away, the recipe as to why, how can you actually create a DJI alternative. And so the funny thing about this is that I put a lot of thoughts into this over the years after I left, etc. And I actually came up with some numbers. And so I'm going to give you my numbers. And I've updated them to 2025 cost of living and salaries and everything like this. And I think they're going to be shocking because people expect this to be very big and all the things that be going on. But they come down to this. They come down to about $60 million in Europe, 120 million in the US, about 200 people, and 3 years of work. That will give you a company that can produce one of the products that would compete with DJI. And this is the part that I want to be clarifying when we're talking about, an alternative to DJI. DJI is a massive company at this point that works on countless different products on multiple market segments and multiple product segments. So we talk a lot about the drones because this is kind of like, the topic and the focus on DJI, but you've got all the cameras that DJI does. I'm recording this right now with some DJI gear, which is good stuff, so I use it. But you also have the bicycles, the Avinox, I think it's called. You have the battery system that exists. You have the LiDAR sensors. You have all sorts of things. It's a very big. So when we are talking about a DJI alternative or DJI competition, I want to put some scope into it because it's fun to get lost into the exciting nature of coming around, etc. And I think it would be very exciting to see the response in a market that isn't, so monolithic coming up. I think for end users and for everybody involved, it'll be a lot more interesting. But that's the scope, right? We're talking about one key product, call it a Mavic or Matrice 350. I'm not including the 400 for a lot of specific reasons because it's a beast on its own. But that would be like basically what it looked like. So I'm going to repeat this: $60 million in Europe, 120 in the US, about 200 people in 3 years. This is what you need to actually get this. Now with that, you don't really have to go straight to the finishing line. You can. This is roughly what it's going to cost you. You can approach this in an indirect way, but what you cannot do is you can't get lost. You have to execute flawlessly. You have to know exactly what you're doing every step of the way. And I mean the exact product direction, the exact engineering execution, all of the aspects that goes into doing mobile robots. And a thing that a lot of people tend to forget, this is why I love them so much, is because this is the hardest things you could possibly do as an engineer, as a product person, right? People will tell you AI, ChatGPT is very hard, very hard. But an LLM is a feature in a robot. I mean, Boston Dynamics showed that an LLM is just a feature. The ability to talk to the robots the way you talk to ChatGPT is at this point, I'm considering as an expectation for drones to do that, for robots to do that. So it is the most difficult part. So you got to be able to have the knowledge of all of those different elements that come in, how you're going to build the teams, how you're going to build the capabilities that you need. And this is where, the first things get, a big problem is that, as you have this crazy high demand of execution, as you have this need not to get lost, Western companies get lost. Sometimes on their own fault, sometimes because of their own ignorance, of their own incompetence. I'm going to go into all this, but they do get lost. And at the end, this is why you see some companies who have raised this kind of money and sometimes even more crashing and burning. And you've seen companies who have raised more than that money and years ago, so where things were still cheaper than it is right now, and the overall conditions were more favorable, and they crashed and burned. That's because it is very, very unforgiving. I don't really like the whole notion that hardware is hard and software is easy and stuff, because I don't think it is. I think software is harder than hardware, and in terms of the difficulty to actually pick it up in the right way. But I think hardware is very unforgiving because your iterations are very expensive in time and money. So you don't have as many as you would have in software. You got to get them right. But just as a super quick sidetrack, in software, when you get it wrong, it could take you a long time to realize that it is. And that is often a death sentence on the company because you now have such a liability in your hand that you just cannot fix it. A multi-million line piece of code that you can't practically refactor is a death sentence. You're dead, but you just don't know it yet. Anyway, for this sidetrack. So why do Western companies get lost? Let's go into a bit of this. The first thing is that, like I mentioned, there's so many different fields that go into building a mobile robots. And the first thing is that the West is super ill-equipped. Ill-equipped in the sense that we have, shipped everything to China. I talked about in a previous video about how absurd it is when you try to make things outside of China. Not that you should not do it, blah, blah, blah. But it's your level of absurdity that it takes a special kind of people to go through this, but that is the context that you're in. And the more important part is the knowledge, all the know-how on how to actually put things together that have to be baked in from the very, very beginning is gone, virtually gone, is practically not here, very, very difficult to access. Now you start having more and more people who are realizing these things, but we haven't even started to be in the catch-up area and bringing that know-how back. So if you wanted to have a company fully in the West. And that is the first problem, is that all these functions that you have in there, that you have these manufacturing techniques, all these product development techniques on the hardware side, they're in China, they're in Asia. And place like Shenzhen is a hyper concentration of that kind of expertise. It has the very, very important things. And that touches on the second problem and why companies get lost, is that they're wildly incompetent. And I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. I think I'm saying this in a more practical way. It's just that the skills are simply missing. And they're not really being transferred. We haven't gone into a moment where DJI starts to do a little bit of this. We see it with Insta360. We see this with the Bamboo guys and the Unitree guys. There's a little bit of an alumni of people who are going out and things, but it's very, very small. It hasn't been really gone the way we've seen on the internet and stuff. So the knowledge and the competence on how to build these things isn't really transferring. There's a ton of projection on this front. And I mean by this is sets of skills will come from a different area. Think about traditional aviation, and they're coming into the drone world thinking like, wow, this Boeing flies, this drone flies, that's the same, right? When they really have little to do with each other. But that's kind of the very big thing. And that means that it creates a ton of, in the day-to-day side quest as a way of figuring out, how to do stuff and then fighting this incompetence. This is a topic on its own for another video, so I'm just going to leave it to that. The next big reason as why companies get lost is that now these days, companies are riddled with tech bros, riddled with people who are going to be doing stunts first and foremost. And there is a reason for that, is that we have as an industry, as a tech industry, groomed tech bros. We've made them for success. We really have gotten them. I'm going to touch on this in a second with the whole money aspect, etc. But there's so many tech bros who are just here to tell you that they're going to do all these wonderful things, and they go around and make these crazy promises and these crazy claims, and no one checks them. No one is going around and bring them back down, and they're just allowed to just go crazy, and let's see if this sticks. It's the industrialization of throwing spaghetti at the walls and see if it sticks. And it just doesn't. And it hasn't yielded that company, because it's not like a little SaaS project where you need to get 5 things right. In this particular context, you need to get 1,000 things right. to get it right. And that touches on the next reason is that companies in the West are obsessed with gimmicks. Obsessed with gimmicks. And on this front, I'm going to touch on this because I don't put the blame into the founders or tech bros and stuff like this about these gimmicks. It's just that there was a moment in time, not so long ago, a little less than 10 years ago, where the money was so easy to access and free that it was very, very quick and simple to raise money on gimmicks. And it was a playbook. It was the way you raise money. You needed to have a thing that was yours, right? And the problem is that the gimmicks are the epitome of the side quest. They become the identity that you have in the company, and then it becomes the thing that you have to continue selling because that's what you told your investors you were going to do, right? You're that gimmick first and foremost. So you got to continue that gimmick. Otherwise, you're no longer who you say you are. And so all of these things together, all this accumulation that creates an impossible task of building a company, a team that's going to be able to deliver on such an ambitious thing as providing one matching product on par with what DJI is doing. And also the one thing I want to touch on before I go too deep into this, I really single out on DJI because the world is singling out DJI. But DJI is not the only Chinese company that does great drones. There's just most of them, a lot of them, you don't even hear about them. But they're still they're the tree that hides the forest, so we're going to stick to this. Back into the impossibility. Impossible is not as unbreakable as it seems. I wrote about this in my book. I call it the impossibility equation. I got this Venn diagram when I explained that breaking down and delivering on the impossible really stems on three things. It stems on courage, freedom, and funds, right? And so, but with a wide definition of each of these three topics. The courage in this industry is pretty much here. Like people have the courage to go around and tackle these big, challenging efforts. But in most of the time, it's riddled in naivety, riddled in this belief that they've got this and this is not going to be as hard as it is. And there's this meme is like, if we had known how hard it was, we wouldn't have done it, right? Which is it's a force in its own, right? It is a real force in its own. But the problem is that you like I said, there is a lot of elements to get right, and the kind of courage that is necessary to have in here is the one to be constantly taking the punches on the unknown and then keep coming at it and going and grinding and solving the problems one after another. The naivety doesn't carry you as far as you think it would. The funds is also an interesting one because there's tons of money out there, but it tends to be very poorly allocated. And that's because it touches a little bit on the courage is that for this company, this fictitious company that could deliver one product that would be giving a sweat to DJI, you have to be having the courage of going and working on all the boring things that are making this product a reality. You got to let go of the gimmicks. You got to let go of the AI for a second. You got to let go of the autonomy and all the things that people want to do. You got to be building all the boring stuff. You got to have the balls to get yourself dirty, really grinding all the things that no one wants to touch, bringing in all the things that no one wants to do. And that makes for a very boring story for investors and for the funds. And that's where the part is becoming very difficult. And this is because, again, it's not, there's no malicious intent into this. Is that I'm an investor. I got $100 million to invest and put in something. Do I put my $100 million into your plastic injection factory for building drones in 3 years, or do I put this into an AI and double my money in the next 6 months? It's not really a conversation point, right? It makes no sense. And as an investor, you have an obligation towards your LPs. You have to make that money work for them. And this is where there's this fund allocation is crossing a mission element to it about building this whole thing. You got to be finding. So you can find these funds, but it's an exercise of boiling down the ocean. And you're back into a very strong difficulty, despite the fact that it looks like there's money everywhere. The kind of money that you're looking for, that you need to back up the stuff you're going to do, is not as available as you'd think. And then the last thing is the freedom. The freedom is the ability for you as a person, you really want to do it. You have the courage to take on all of the nasty stuff that are necessary. And you found the one gem fun person who's going to be backing you to actually making this a reality. Now you need to be able to commit the next 3 years of your life into building something like this, right? And that is, I wouldn't say it's the easiest of all them all, because I'm not 100% sure in this current context. But what I know is that it's getting harder and harder for people to have this much amount of time to actually get into it. And this is a function of the cost of living and the wealth inequalities and all the stuff that you hear about everywhere. And it boils down into, without being political, it boils down to something very simple, is that everybody now, at every aspect of their life, until you really made it, you find yourself in a position where you got big bills to pay and they're getting bigger every day, right? And this has been pretty much the story of the past 3-5 years for a huge amount of people. And so they may have the freedom to spend their time on a 2 weeks project, a 4 weeks project. Like I mentioned, a lot of guys are talking about their heist project they have on a couple of weeks, and then they really want to get this side project like turn around and become something, but they don't have 3 years to spend of their life into getting this stuff out the door, or very few people have. And that's really fundamentally why, you haven't seen it yet. Why is it so hard for making it happen? Now, this is absolutely possible to make an alternative to DJI and bring something. And I think it would be very beneficial, that it would be a true competition to DJI. The best stuff that ever came out of DJI came from the daring and the challenge that someone may come into the territory, and the team over there start cranking. The consumer is going to love a competition like this. And I think even like creating such a competition would be an interesting things to see in the first place. But it's not going to happen until you're going to see these 3 things coming in, this laser focusing and this amount of scales put together in one umbrella. This is the only way you can actually have a shot at bringing something. There's obviously so much more nuance I want to bring into it. But rather than letting people guessing on, thinking about, but that's the subsidies, etc. If it was the subsidies, the US government would have given the subsidies. The European government would have given the subsidies. It's not the subsidies. But it is, like the hardware and things. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of all these different things, and you're not going to see a true alternative at DJI until all of these elements are lining up into one company, one group of people.